Thank you all for coming on this lovely winter day. Ian has prepared a very thorough budget report. There is lots of good news to share. And I just want to say I'm Elliot Weininger as JPBC faculty co-chair, how much I appreciate this thorough report. I think we're very fortunate to be given such a clear and comprehensive window into the state of the university. So thank you very much, Ian, and take it away.
Thank you, Elliot, for the kind words. Way to set me up for a failure, but there we go. We'll see how it goes. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll spend the next 45 minutes or so going through the budget town hall presentation. Hopefully you'll find it informative. And we'll get into that in a second or so. I would just like to take this opportunity, though, to recognize two individuals. It takes an army to put on an event like this, and Laurie's been doing this on behalf of finance and administration and myself for the last 2 or 3 cycles, I think it is, and Julie as well, of course, it goes without saying. But this will be Laurie's final swan song, so to speak, at the town hall, as she sails on to the next journey in her life of retirement. So we wish you all the very, very best. We thank you for everything. I personally thank you for everything you've done. You've made my life a lot easier, and you made me look 10 times better than I actually am, so I thank you for that. But it also allows me to introduce Bonnie Bradley, who is joining us. So welcome, Bonnie. This is your first morning, I guess, in the role. So there's Bonnie. And we look forward to working together, and we'll have some fun. Life's too short not to have some fun. Okay, so Budget Town Hall. So there are a number of things I want to kind of share with you, and we'll lay out the agenda here. So there's 3 areas that I want to touch on. First is around enrollment and retention. Very important, and we'll go into why that's important. Then we'll step into the 5-year model, the financial update, where we're at. Then we'll talk about headcount. I'll take some Q&A, and then Sarah will give us a brief, I've been told, update on strategic planning committee. I thought that she could take 45 minutes and I could do this in 15, but apparently that's not going to be the case. So that's okay. We'll go with this material and work our way through it. So the charts, as I show you, if you've been to this before, will look familiar. I tried to keep some consistency in the format in terms of how I talk to the financials for the university, because I just think it aids the following of the evolution. So I'm probably going to work this slide pretty hard because there's some good points here that I think I want to tease out. There's 3 sections, if you will, and I think this helps to set the scene and kind of lay out the landscape of where we are, and perhaps more importantly, where we're heading. So there's one takeaway that I'd really kind of ask you to take from this conversation. The first one is that we are in a financially pretty good position, particularly when you look at the trend of our finances, and also when you look at us compared to some of our peer institutions. But I will say that we are getting to an inflection point. And I'll talk about what I mean by that inflection point as we go through this presentation and we go through the material. That inflection point is enrollment moving from sustained growth to probably a period of stabilization. It's not a bad thing. It just means there's other decisions, if you will, that we just need to debate and take accordingly. So the first bullet I want to kind of talk around is a focus on enrollment and retention is fundamental to the long-term stability of the university. So why do I say that, and why is that important? If we step back and we just think about the overall business hydraulics and the financial hydraulics of the university, we have revenue or income that comes in, and we have expenses that goes out. When it comes to revenue, I always use a very simple formula, and you've heard me use it before, which is P times Q. P being price, tuition fee, Q being a quantity or number of students. Now, typically, those are both variables. So price can go up, price can come down, number of students can go up, it can go down. For us, the price is more of a fixed component than a variable component. Why do I say that? It's because SUNY has made it a policy not to increase tuition fees. Tuition fees is a source of our income. You take your tuition fee, multiply the number of students you have, that gives you your revenue base. So that's the revenue side. When you think about now the expense side, as it was mentioned at JPBC this morning when we had the similar conversation, we are living in a world of inflation. Things cost more. We have salary increases and salary inflation. When you look at our cost base, so our expenses, 85% of that, roughly right, is people. And we get salary increases. They may be contractually agreed with the unions or whatever, but we have salary increases. And typically that's in about an average of 3%. So we know each year that our cost base will grow by 3%. So we have to try to find ways to make sure that the revenue grows either greater than that or at least in line with that. And I go back to my formula of P times Q, price times a quantity. Price is fixed. The only variable is quantity. Therefore, we need to ensure we bring more students in or we retain at a higher level. Hence why enrollment and retention is fundamental to the long-term stability of the university. So having said that, how are we doing? So if we look at the last 3 years, we've done exceptionally well. We're projecting to have completed, on a full semester measure, 3 consecutive years of 500 plus student incoming growth. So each fall for the last 3 years, the enrollment has gone up by 500. That's a little bit like the gift that kind of keeps giving for a period of time, because once the student joins, all being well, they'll be here for 4 years. So you bring somebody in, and then they bring you additional revenues for a sustained period of time. If we look at retention, so what do we mean by retention? That's the metric of how many of our students across various categories, whether it's transfer students, undergraduates, or graduates, come back after each year. So what level do they retain at? And I'll show you a chart later on, but when you look at that and you look at those retention metrics and you look at them from 5 years ago to now, each of those metrics have gone up. So we've done well on enrollment, we're doing well on retention. So when you bring all of that together, coupled with the continued support from the state, and I can go into that in a little while, that has enabled us over the last 3 years to move from a structural deficit of $9 million to a projected structural deficit of $1 million for fiscal year 25-26. So in 3 years, we've taken the structural deficit, we've improved the structural deficit by $8 million. That has given us the opportunity to do things. It's given us the opportunity to invest. And we'll talk about those a little bit later on. That's the bright side, okay? So to bring a little bit of balance, if you will, and I'm a finance guy, so by nature, I'm a little more pessimistic than most, perhaps. We still do need to continue to exercise fiscal responsibility. Why? We're still operating in a structural deficit. What do I mean by structural deficit? The amount of revenue I'm bringing in is not sufficient to cover the amount of expenses going out. It's like balancing your checkbook at home. We have an overdraft, if you want to put it that way. Do we want to operate in an overdraft or a structural deficit world? No, we don't. We want to be break even or even being in a surplus. So we just need to be a little conscious about that. The other area is the overall state budget. There's a degree of uncertainty with the state budget. When our budget was approved coming into this fiscal year, the state did reserve the right to, let's say, fine-tune or adjust that budget. Thus far, touch wood, they haven't done that. But it's still a possibility. Now, when we think about the state, we're funded out of what they call their general fund. And we get funded in two ways. We get funded through what we would call state support. And they also fund us, kind of off the book, so to speak, but legitimately, for employee benefits. So the employee benefits, we don't absorb those costs. They're absorbed at the state level. Now, I'll show you, we do a 5-year financial projection model. The state does a financial projection model as well. And as of, I think, 25, 26, their general fund is sitting at about $49 billion. Their projection out through 28, 29 says that that general fund will still be in surplus, but it will step down to about 11 billion. So they have a general fund today at 48, it will start to step down by 11. Now, when we look at our 5 years out, you will look at some of our numbers, and I will caveat those numbers by saying, when you look out into the future, it becomes harder to be more precise in your forecasting and or budgeting. And we tend to be a little bit more on the conservative side than not. And typically we come in a little bit better. So, hopefully the budget for the state in terms of their calculations will come in a little bit better. To be fair, as we've gone through the year, as best as I can understand, their forecast has improved as they've gone through the year. And some of that is related to their revenue assumptions. I will also add, from a SUNY perspective, they do have a mechanism to identify institutions that are, my words, financially challenged or financially stretched. There are 14 institutions in that campus focus group. Oswego was added in the last year. Of the other 13, and by the way, these 13 campuses get more help than you could possibly want or wish for from SUNY in terms of their oversight around your budget and around your expenses. But of those 13, 5 of them have improved in the last 12 months. 8 of them have continued to deteriorate. We are not on the naughty list. We don't intend to be on the naughty list, but it just helps to put a little bit of perspective to our performance, also puts into perspective what's going on in the SUNY world and some of the things that they are focusing on. Looking ahead, as I mentioned, there's an inflection point that's coming, and we'll show it when we go through the data, that we have been in a period of sustained enrollment growth. We're now shifting really to probably a period of stability or modest growth. And we'll go through that in a minute, but that's important to have that in the forefront of your mind. I will leave you on this slide. I said I'd work this slide really hard, but I will leave you on this slide with this following quote. It comes from Andy Grove, who was the CEO of Intel Corporation. And the quote goes, "Success breeds complacency. Complacency breeds failure. Only the paranoid survive." So as I said this morning, I'm not looking to you to become paranoid. That's me. I'll be the paranoid one here, okay? But it is a good reminder that we can't rest on our laurels, and it's a good reminder not to become complacent. And when you see the performance over the last 5 years, it could be easy for us to become complacent. But the conversations that we have at Cabinet, the conversations I'm involved in, we are far from complacent. Will this paradigm shift of going from sustained growth to a period of stability create some different opportunities? Let's just call them opportunities. Don't have to use the word challenges, opportunities. Yes, they will. But that's life, that's natural. And if anything, we can draw, and this came out of actually College Council earlier in the week, anything you can draw, conclusions you can draw from the way that Brockport has responded to challenges. It has been very positive. They grabbed the proverbial horn by the, grab the proverbial bull by the horn rather than the horn by the bull, and go forward, and you go with it. So I'm optimistic that we will step up and we'll embrace that paradigm shift and take us to the next level. Okay. Sorry about that. So let's do a little bit of a deeper dive in terms of enrollment and retention. So this first chart here, it's a little bit of a busy chart, but if you look at the top left-hand side, it shows total enrollment for graduates and undergraduates over a time frame from 2019 through to 2029. And then the bottom part shows the retention rates. So let's just start with enrollment to start off with. Enrollment, super important. Explain why it's super important, but let's put some kind of metrics around that to really re-emphasize and hone in on that point. That says that for roughly every 150 students that we bring on board, new students we bring on board, it contributes about $1 million of revenue in an academic year. Now, if we retain all of those over a 4-year period, it's going to give you $4 million of additional revenue. That's additional revenue that we can use to offset or reduce the structural deficit, which is what we have done successfully over the last 2 or 3 years. And it also gives us and enables us to be able to make some investments, which we have done as well, and we'll share on that in a little while. So for 2025 full, these are all full numbers. We're showing or we're projecting that total enrollment will be at 7,929. So that's a good growth over the prior year. And if you look at that growth since the fall of 2022, where we were at 6,400, that's a 23% growth. That's a phenomenal growth in terms of overall enrollment. Now, there's 2 lines on that chart. The reddy, orangey, whatever color that one is up through 2024, our actual numbers. And then beyond that was what we were predicting back in the May timeframe. The blue line is our current prediction now. So versus May, we are predicting a stronger enrollment number than we had predicted 3 or 4 months ago, which is encouraging. The other big takeaway is cast your eye to the year 2026, and the enrollment number starts with an 8. So we're going through a kind of psychological glass ceiling of 8,000 students. So in a year's time, we could be 8,000 plus students. When we did our prediction back in the summer, early part of the year, we didn't even foresee getting to 8,000 through 2029. Again, reflection of the tremendous amount of hard work that we all do, spearheaded by Sarah and her team, but everybody in terms of driving enrollment and then more importantly, driving retention. So let's talk about retention. So the chart at the bottom shows trends of retention. I don't expect you to be able to read each of those individual lines, but the takeaway I would ask you to take from this chart is, if you look at the dotted lines that I put onto the chart, it's my way of kind of breaking those trends into, again, an improving or growing trend to a stable trend. I mentioned earlier, when you look at each of those metrics and going back 5 years to 2021 to compare them to now, 2025, each of the metrics may have taken a little bit of a circuitous route between that time frame, but they are all up over their start point in 2021. Excuse me. When you then look on the out years, we're starting to see them stabilizing a bit. Now, there are some macroeconomics that are out there that we've taken into account when we've done the forecast. Everyone's talking about the graduation cliff. It's not the quite phrase. I can't remember what the exact phrase is. Demographic cliff. Thank you very much. So we know that that is potentially coming. So the number of high school graduates is declining. We also know there's a lot going on in the world that would want us to be naturally kind of cautious in terms of where we see enrollment going. So is there some opportunity here going forward? Personally, I think there probably is. It's going to take a lot of hard work, but I think we've been appropriately cautious when it comes to our assessment around where we see enrollment and retention going. Now, when I talk about retention, I think that now becomes a real key focus for us, because we've worked very hard over the last 3 years to bring more students to the institution. Now we've got to work equally hard to make sure we retain all of those. And I think SUNY's recognized that as well, because they've launched this new initiative called Academic Momentum. Now, Academic Momentum is a series of metrics or measures that SUNY has put forward that all of the 64 institutions in the SUNY world are going to be measured against. And those are statistics, or metrics, that focus on graduation rate over 4 years, graduation rate over 6 years, full-to-full retention, 30+ credits earned in a year. So there's lots of different measures that they are trying to hold us to in an attempt to basically float all boats upwards so that the overall retention numbers at the SUNY level improve. Now, we've got a head start on this because we did a bunch of work with NIS, National Institute of Student Success, out of Georgia State, where we provided them with a lot of data. They looked at that data, and they made recommendations around things that we're doing well from a student success standpoint and things that maybe we want to focus upon. The takeaway from that was we're doing a good job. There are areas for improvement. There are always areas of improvement. That's life. But it gives us a good foundation to then think about what investments, what programs, what focus do we need to put in place to be able to meet those academic momentum objectives, metrics, but far more importantly, it will drive those retention numbers up, and it will help us from a revenue standpoint as well. That's water in there. There's nothing else in there. That's just at times I wish there was, but not. Okay. So let's do a little bit of a double click now and take a look at the enrollment numbers for undergraduate and graduate. So top left is undergraduate, bottom left is the graduate population. If you look at the undergraduates, we're projecting 6,153. Again, good growth over the prior year. And then same format with the lines here. The orange one is the previous forecast, the blue is the current one. As you can see, not unsurprisingly, because the total is higher, the undergraduate is higher as well. But it does start to moderate in the out years. So back to that point about we're entering an inflection point, we're entering stability. Now, when you look at the bottom part of the page, and you look at the graduate enrollment for the full semester, and you look at those curves or those lines, that's phenomenal. I mean, that is exponential growth. To think that in 2022 we had 1,275 graduates enrolled. We are now at 1,776, and we're projecting that we will break through the 2,000 barrier by 2028. Outside of SUNY Empire, we have the strongest, largest, and best graduate program and population. So everybody should be incredibly proud of that. We bring new programs forward, it attracts more students to us. It really is a phenomenal achievement. When you look at some of the other institutions, they're starting to, this is why we can't get complacent, right? All the fantastic things that we are doing, other institutions are now starting to copy us. Greatest form of flattery, maybe, not sure. But now they're looking at the opportunity to grow graduate programs. We did scholarships 2 or 3 years ago. Now they're looking to be more pervasive around scholarships. So they are, I'm not going to say they're on our coattails, but they're trying to chase us. They are trying to chase us down. From an early indication standpoint, if we look at the comments on the chart at the bottom, it says currently first year transfer and graduate applications are running on par or ahead of the last year for spring and fall. Takes a lot of hard work to be able to get to that position. A lot of important work to get to that position as well. And probably a number of sleepless nights from lots of people. But we are positioning ourselves as well as we possibly can to make sure we can achieve those numbers that we aspire to achieving and overachieve. No harm in overachieving. So how are we doing against our peer group? This is a fun chart. Okay, so give me a second or so just to orientate you around this chart. So what I'm showing for the first 3 bars are SUNY overall performance. The middle set of bars is how the comprehensives collectively are doing. The final 3 bars is how we are doing in SUNY Brockport. And it's looking at undergraduate and graduate enrollment trends. And I've picked 3 time periods here. I've picked 2019 to 2025, 2022 to 25, 24, 25. I could have picked any time frame, and the message is the same. We are outperforming our competition. At the end of the day, life is a competition. Everything comes down to competition. So we are outperforming the competition. So let's take one. Let's go with the 2022 to 2025 time frame. So that's the orangey bar. So SUNY overall grew enrollment by 6.5%. The comprehensives, a little bit below that at 5.5. We were at 23.4%. 23.4% versus our peers at 5%. Phenomenal performance. And that message is true across all of those timeframes. So fantastic performance. Thank you to everybody that's enabled us to deliver that. And let's ensure that we keep delivering that. How am I doing on time? Because I don't want to shortchange Sarah on her time. Okay, I won't spend oodles of time on this one. This is it's an important in the sense that we just take a look at and reflect on the hydraulics that make up our enrollments. And what I mean hydraulics are the components that go into the overall enrollment numbers. So if you look at the undergraduate at the top part of the chart, we look at new freshmen, we look at transfers, we look at continuing students, and there's another category that's kind of just dwindling down. But again, it reinforces, as you can see in the numbers that are circled in red at the bottom, the tremendous growth that we've had over the last 3 years. That's where the 500 on average per year comes from the last 3 years. Which is driving 8 and 6% growth, phenomenal growth. And then as you go to the out years, we're back into that kind of stabilized phase. I know it sounds like a broken record, but it is something I think that's important that we just internalize and we just have in the back of our mind as we look at that. Now, going forward, we had good conversations at Cabinet that says, at this inflection point, where do we want to go? So we're going to break this 8,000 ceiling. So do we want to maintain at that 8,000? Do we want to grow? Where do we want to go? So the position we're at now is we're looking more to kind of stabilizing around the 8,200 student range. That's what we're setting our stall out to do, which I think is it's a great objective. Okay. So that's enrollment, that's retention. I'm now going to shift gears a little bit to the finances. And we're going to take a little bit of a snapshot, dive into the 5-year model. So first of all, what's the 5-year model? Most of you are probably familiar, but we do a financial projection out for 5 years. Why do we do that? Why do we do that? Because it makes us think about the key elements that go into that financial model. It makes us think about where we see enrollment evolving. It enables us to think about those macroeconomic, those macro impacts that we touched on earlier, how they could potentially impact us. That's key. Once we kind of hone in on where we think the enrollment number is going to be, we can then run the financials off of that, so we can work out where we think we are from a revenue standpoint, where we will be from a cost standpoint. And it's important because this enables us to be able to make better informed decisions from a financial standpoint. Trust me, there are a number of institutions that don't run a multi-year financial model. They just look at the current year. And I don't know the answer to this one, but I would conjecture when you look at those 14 institutions that are in the naughty box, how many of those aren't doing a 5-year projection? I don't know the answer, but I think it would be an interesting question to pose. Because this enables us to say, okay, if we want to do A, B, and C, what is that impact on us financially? There is a question that was posed earlier that says, with all of this good news, why aren't we more expansive with our expenditure? I'll touch on that in a little bit. A lot of the answer to that is where we started from, coming out of kind of COVID. But we'll touch on that. But I just wanted to plant that seed with you as we start to look at these numbers. So the way that this chart works, it starts off with the reserve balance, or A, as I've tagged it there. That's the amount of reserves that we have on hand as we go into the financial year. As we go into that financial year, we go back to revenue, we go back to expense. We take one from the other, and if expenses are higher than revenue, we have a structural deficit. So on line B, or where it's tagged as B, those numbers in red are a financial deficit. Revenue is not sufficient to cover costs. So that structural deficit is a drain on our reserves. So it takes our reserve number down. We then have a line called temporary adjustments. And these are things by their nature are temporary. They're not going to be there permanently. So we don't put them through like kind of the revenue or the operating expense line as discrete. We treat them as a temporary. Typically, those temporary adjustments work in our favor. And there's a multitude of things inside of those. So you take your opening reserve balance, which is A. So in 2024, that was $26.3 million. As a forecast, and then I'll talk about the column next to it in a second. Then you look at the structural deficit, and we were projecting a structural deficit of 3.1 million. So they take that away from the reserves. Temporary adjustments we thought would be favorable for 1.6. And we end up with a reserve balance of 24.8 million. That was the forecast. Now we look at 2024 actuals, and the structural deficit came in at 2.1 million, not 3.1 million. So we came in better than we thought we were going to, and it's predominantly driven by revenue. So revenue came in at 73.5 versus 72.5, came in $1 million better. Basically just dropped straight through. Temporary adjustments also came in a little bit stronger. So when you do the math, our reserves opened at 26.3 and closed at 26.6. So our reserves got stronger, our structural deficit improved versus with forecast. I may rue these words, but typically that's how things pan themselves out. We typically come in a little better than what we forecast. So that's why when you look at those out years and then you look at the structural deficit is starting to get away from us, just have in the back of your mind, this is based upon what we know today. It's based upon the enrollment number that we kind of honed in on earlier. But you're also working against that dynamic, if you remember what I said at the beginning, that the cost base is always going up by 3 points per year. So when you look at that model and you look at the cost line, each year the costs are going up and revenue is pretty much the same. So to the extent that we can drive the enrollment higher than we anticipate, improve the retention, then good things will happen in terms of that performance against the structural deficit. Roughly 2/3 of our revenue comes from tuition. So in 2025, it's about $52 million will come from tuition. We also get state support, 25.5 million. Now the last couple of years, they've given us roughly 2 million additional support each year. Given where we are with the state budget, given where we are with the macro environment, we haven't projected that incremental each year reoccurs going forward. So again, another example of where we're being a little bit cautious around our revenue assumptions. I go back to those campuses. You know, they could very easily say, the campuses that are in the focus groups, they could very easily say to get out of trouble, they'll just grow revenue. They'll just assume I'm going to get more students. I mean, that's great because it sorts the math, but is it really reality? So we take a different stance, a different view to that. What else do we want to pick out of this one? The majority of our expense is labor related, it's about 85%. But the key takeaway here is structural deficit is down to $1.2 million. Yes, this says it deteriorates, but there's in my mind, I think there's more good news items that could come our way that would help us with that. And our reserve balances are strong. Okay, so revenue expenses. So this is a waterfall. So what I'm trying to do is just to walk you, waterfall, from the expenses of the prior year to the expenses for the current year that we're forecasting, and that's the left-hand side chart. And on the right-hand side chart, that's on the left-hand side is revenue, on the right-hand side is expenses. So revenue in last year, we had 73.4 million. We're projecting 77.4. How do we get that? We get it from 1.8 million or 1.746 coming from additional tuition fees because of the enrollment performance that we've achieved. And then we're getting that extra 2 million of state funding that I mentioned that we haven't assumed will reoccur going forward from an incremental standpoint. Then when you look at the operating expenses on the right-hand side, same logic. It starts with the expense base last year and then where we think it's going to be. The important thing here is, and I spoke about investments, and I also shared an insight to investments back in the May town hall that I did. And at that point, I was indicating that we were going to make investments of about 3.1 million. So we've actually increased that by 600,000 just during the summer months, because now our investments are $3.7 million. And you can see those on the right-hand side. So what's making up those investments? Well, we have salary increases. That's about 2.5 million. But there are investments that we have made across pretty much all of the divisions, where it's focused around student engagement, student support, around academic affairs, etc. You can read the list there. So what are those investments? Some of them are in programs. Some of them are in people. Some of them are in support activities. So a good one that Lorraine's been driving is around mental health support for students. So we're now investing, we already provide that support, but now we're upgrading that support with a new vendor and new tool set. So that's encouraging. On top of that, we've also been able to make some investments in our capital. So particularly in some of our heavy equipment for the facilities team. A lot of that equipment is kind of running on its last legs and was running on its last legs. And so we found some funds to be able to replace some of that equipment. We haven't replaced everything that needs to be done. We recognize that. We are trying to make sure that we can do in a balanced and controlled manner, make the right investments. Now, at the cabinet meetings that we've had recently, we have what we call a budget retreat, and part of that budget retreat is to look at this data to help us make decisions about where can we invest and how much can we invest. And then we have a prioritization process for those investments. I won't spend a lot of time on this chart. It just shows the reserve balances over time. The one takeaway I would take, again, it's the same structure, very consistent. The orangey line is our prior forecast. The blue line's our current. The one takeaway is we are currently projecting, because of the stronger enrollment numbers than we anticipated, and also because the less money we are paying out in scholarships, that is not a message to say we are giving less scholarships. Far from it. It's just that when we did the original forecast for how much we thought we would need to invest, we over-forecasted. So now we kind of trued it up. And as you true it up, it has an impact upon the reserves. Because the scholarships we're funding out of reserves. We don't fund it out of the structural deficit. So the takeaway is we are now projecting that reserves stay positive through the 2029 timeframe, whereas previously we thought they would go negative. So that's good. That's good news. All right, I want to give you time for questions, so I'll pick this up a little bit. Okay, structural deficit. So a question we quite often get is we hear all this great news about enrollment, we hear all this great news about retention, but we still can't make investments in personnel or programs or whatever it may well be. So how do I square that? How do I square that triangle, so to speak? If you look at where we came from, so if you look at this chart and you go back to 2022 and you look at the structural deficit we had then, it was $9.3 million. Over those 3 years, as I said, we've got that back to $1 million. So we started in a hole. We've dug our way out of that hole. And we've done a great job at doing that such a good job that we've been able to do some significant investments this year, probably the largest investment year, certainly since COVID, and possibly before. I just haven't seen the data, haven't got that data. So we still have to remain fiscally responsible, because I don't particularly want to continue to operate in a world of a deficit. I'd much rather that number be break even or even a surplus. But hopefully that puts a little bit of context around why we have all this good news, why there is still a degree of fiscal responsibility in place. It's because we've come out of a big hole, we've done a lot of great work. You don't want to slide back down. All that work, you've got to that level. You want to try and maintain it, at least kick on from that. But we do recognize that investments need to be made. Okay, so with that, I'm just going to quickly go through some headcount data. This is really a little bit of a flyby. There was a request coming out of JPBC to take a look at so headcount trends, headcount data, so we've done that. I have a chart that shows total headcount. I have a chart that shows hires, attrition, and then retirement eligible, just as kind of data points. This chart shows total headcount. It is as at June the 30th of each year. The total line, which has the asterisk next to it, excludes adjuncts, downtown Brockport, GAs, TAs, and temporary staff. I have annotated the adjuncts, because I think that's an important part of the conversation when we look at the overall support for our students from an academic standpoint. These are people, whole people. These aren't FTEs. It still blows my mind. You have 0.2 of a person here and 0.2 of a person there. So this is just total absolute head count people. So at the end of June 2025, we had a head count number of 914 individuals. So that was up over 2024, where we had 880. And when you look at the adjuncts, we're running at 270, up from 249 in the prior year. And then if you go back over like the 2020 kind of time frame coming forward, you look at academic affairs, personnel plus adjuncts, we're at 742 folks. Today we're at 732. So 742 to 732. So basically static level-ish. Now, the academic affair number includes faculty and staff. So there's a double click there that needs to be done as well. The bottom part of the chart looks at years of service. So it just gives you a snapshot of the full-time employees into those years of service brackets. And they're in 10-year increments, 0 to 10, 10 to 20, etc. The only thing that I would draw your attention to on this particular chart is when you look at the percentage of employees with 0 to 10 years of service. Over the last 3 years, that population has grown by roughly 5 points. So now 57.5% of our population have 0 to 10 years of service. And that's really come out of the 10 to 20 year bucket. Hires, if we look at the hires over that same time frame, so in June 30th, 2025, we had hired 137 people. Up against 122. These are gross hires. These are not net hires. The next chart will show attrition. This is gross hires coming in. Some of these will be new positions. Some of these will be replacing people that have left or are attrited out of the university. And most divisions have shown increase in terms of their number of hires. So what's attrition done in that same time frame? Attrition's actually come down. So if you look at the top left, that shows the number of people that have attrited or left the university over those years. The top right-hand graphic shows you the reasons why, either through voluntary leaving, involuntary, and that is where people have either failed probation, haven't been renewed, they were terminated, or they had some medical reason why they left. And then you can see the number of people that are retired as well. The interesting factor there is around the attrition rate. So if you look at the attrition rate, so that's as a percentage, so that's the number of people that have attrited over the total headcount population. It's really come from a high in 2023 of 14.6% and has stepped down for the subsequent 2 years. We're now at 11.3%. Interestingly, and perhaps not unsurprisingly, the number of retirees has been going up over the last 12 months as well. The last chart here I will share is around retirement eligible. Again, this is a snapshot in time. All of these headcount data points are snapshots in time, but this shows the number of folks that have are now in that retirement eligible, which is 55 and 5 years, I think we agreed on. 5 years of service, so 55 years of age and 5 years of service. So the numbers on the left-hand side, let's say 5 to 9.99, those are the individuals that have somewhere between 5 and 10 years of service, are now in that eligible retirement window. The next set of numbers over show people that have 10 years of service. So overall, we got 312 people that kind of sit in that retirement eligible window. And not unsurprisingly, about 2/3 of those sit inside of academic affairs. So the beauty of headcount data is you can slice, dice it, cut it every which way to Sunday. And it probably raises more questions than it gives you necessarily answers. But I think it's good just to share this, just to give a snapshot of where we are. So that concludes my presentation. I will open it up to any questions, comments, or observations. You have a question?
Yeah, I do. Sorry.
No.
And I really wish I'd thought about this before. The academic affairs and admin finance, if you go back a couple of slides, in 2020, does that reflect the move of bits from academic affairs to admin and finance? I mean, partially, because that was when that happened, right? So I mean, I think that is, and I wish I had thought about this before. That's what I'm saying. We should check that. But if you look at those figures, a different one, back one more.
You're looking at absolutes?
Yeah. So if you look at the increase in admin and finance, you can see that number, and you can see the number going down. It's not a direct swap, but that's when we did change bits. So that is just a point of data I want us to be aware of, so that it's clearer.
Yeah, that's good. I honestly don't know, but
I'm sorry, I didn't think about that before.
That's okay. But there was an interesting comment this morning about the academic affairs. So I did go back to get the data from Elise, who's fantastic. She's fabulous. The amount of data that she's pulled for me in a very short period of time has been phenomenal. So she's great. If you go back and look at academic affairs, back in 2018, the academic affairs headcount was 497. It then grew to 513, and then it grew to 520. So it's how long do you want to call a piece of string, right, in terms of looking at the trend? But that was a question that got raised. So it's just another interesting data point. But that's a good. There's lots of hydraulics and dynamics here. Any other questions?
Thank you. Have you ever broken out revenue by graduate education versus undergraduate or special sessions versus the other academic sessions?
We have that data, so I can certainly pull that data. To be honest, I've not really looked at that data, so I couldn't give you any insights to it, but yes, we certainly do have that data. Yeah, I can pull that together. Maybe that's a good one, Elliot, for a JPBC conversation.
Well, I guess I'm thinking whether or not we're making a greater percentage of revenue off of those folks.
Yeah, that's a good question. Any other questions? Going once? Twice? Sarah, you're up.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Kelly, the Vice President for Enrollment Management and also the Chair of the Strategic Plan Committee. I am going to be very brief, so if you want to think of more complex, difficult questions for Ian about the budget, you still have time to do that. So our strategic plan committee, last year was our first year in this new format, and we have built on the work of the strategic plan assessment committee from 2 years ago. So that group really focused on finalizing our key performance indicators for the university. And our group then took that one step further to look at, okay, how are we doing? We set out to do this work in 2022. What have we accomplished so far? What is left to accomplish? So the structure of our group, we have goal groups again. Many of you serve on them, so thank you for being on those goal groups. Focus on each of the 4 strategic plan goals. Also on our steering committee, in addition to the leaders of those groups, we have an IR rep, Paul. Is Paul here? No. As well as Denise, to have a stronger link to the academic strategic planning process. So it's kind of been evolving and it's been going pretty well. We have a very high level overview for you today of our strategic plan progress. This is also on the strategic plan website. Again, very high level. The group has gone through and has progress on all of our strategies and metrics. That is a couple dozen pages. So we just got a few highlights for this beautiful marketing piece that our marketing and communications group put together. So I'm just going to talk about it briefly. For each goal, we have a couple of, again, key performance indicators with some data here. And what I really love is on the bottom of each one of these, there's more of a qualitative example that brings life to the numbers. So this one is the new video that came out with Where Will Brockport Take You, really highlighting experiential learning, internships, and all the different things that our students are doing at Brockport. So if you haven't seen that yet, it's awesome. Check it out. So for goal 1, being a great university at which to learn, again, some key progress points. 91% of our graduates from 2024 are employed, enrolled in grad school, or listed in the military. 64% of our students participated in research or field of study research. Over almost 1,800, wouldn't that have been nice to have just 2 more? 1,800 students enrolled in an internship practice or seminar class. 340 students presented at Scholars Day, and 167 students studied abroad. There's a lot more, again, that goes into this goal. And also, one thing that we learned last year when we started this work was there's a number of different areas that we need to kind of tighten up our data gaps. So there's some places that we're working on this year to try and get more data around each of the 4 goals, and that's a big project for us this year. For goal 2, to be engaged with our community, we had 51 businesses launched and 853 clients counseled through the SBDC last year. We had just over 1,400 students enrolled at REOC, which is huge. REOC is the largest EOC in the state, so, right? Yeah? Yeah. First or second. We're going to really believe in the first in this moment. We also have had at REOC, shout out to Roosevelt, the largest growth in many recent years. So it's been going great. 653 pounds of food were collected by student athletes and donated to the Brockport Food Shelf last year as well. There's 19 alumni and community boards, and they met 34 times, showing the engagement we have of our alumni and members of our community and our campus. And then we had 68.5 million marketing impressions, which is awesome. So again, other quotes on the bottom of this page by one of our students talking about their experience. So it came up a little bit odd on the screen, but again, it's on the website if you want to check it out. For goal 3, to be sustainable and thriving for the 21st century, we talk about this goal a lot. It's a goal close to my heart because it's where the enrollment numbers live. For this one in particular, one of the highlights is a 23% enrollment growth over the past 3 years, and we do maintain our position as the largest SUNY comprehensive university too, in addition to having the largest growth among the universities. We had a 22% increase in student athlete participation since 2022. We have a retention rate that has improved since fall 2016 to 75.9%, which is awesome and getting us closer to our academic momentum goals from SUNY. And we have raised $4.4 million in private support in 2024-2025. And then from trash to treasure, 350 bags of items were collected and donated, which is another great program. And on to goal 4. To be a great university at which to work. Many of you are aware of the Great Colleges to Work For survey, so there's a couple of just key metrics and questions from that survey. 76% of SUNY Brockport faculty and staff scored very good to excellent in the well-being category in that survey. And similarly, 75% of SUNY Brockport faculty and staff scored very good to excellent for inclusion, belonging, and community. Ian touched on this, but the turnover rate has also decreased, and the presidential task forces that were studying campus dining and transportation are looking at other ways to improve areas there, including aesthetic improvements, facilities improvements, and then a number of different communication efforts were completed and continue to grow from the cabinet level and beyond. So just a little bit of work on what we accomplished last year. Moving forward, we don't have that much time left in our strategic plan, and we have a giant transition happening with a new president coming. So our committee's focused on closing those assessment gaps and getting data to help us understand, again, what have we accomplished, what is left to accomplish, and also create a really strong foundation for the next president to come in and engage in that strategic planning in the future. So our plan runs to 2027, so it's wild to think there's only a little bit of time left before that's over. So any questions for me? Or any very complicated questions for Ian? Great, thanks everybody.